Hello friends and welcome to my session. My name is Christos Matskas and I will be talking to you about getting started with the Microsoft Identity Platform today. I work as a program manager for Microsoft in the Identity Division. I'm part of the developer advocacy team. You can find me on Twitter, I'm fairly active. And you can reach out to me on Twitch or any other means that you would like to get in touch with. What I do is primarily trying to inspire you, developers and IT pros, to achieve more with our platform and our tools. Some other stuff about me, I am a father and a husband. I've got two great daughters and a very understanding wife. I'm an open source advocate. I've done open source for some time now, and I continue to be part of the community. And finally, I like to work out. I'm a fitness geek. And whenever I have time, I try to play some games on my Xbox. And without further ado, I would like to start talking to you about what the Microsoft Identity Platform is and what it has to offer to you. So as we're looking at the platform, first and foremost, what is identity? Identity is about managing and authenticating users, authorizing users to use the platform. And the whole point of the Microsoft Identity Platform is to make it easy for your developers or you as a developer to work with identity and access management. So some of the basic things that we try to achieve here with the platform is first and foremost getting you to leverage your existing identity and save you time and effort when you implement things. Authentication isn't something that people get super excited or have in-depth expertise. In fact, it's one of these things that they will jump in, implement quickly, hopefully securely, and then move on to the next task. So we want to make this experience as robust and easy as possible. As a developer, you might be asking how easy it is for me to get started with your platform or working with identity. And our goal is to make this as simple as possible. So no matter what the solution is, whether it's a line of business application for your enterprise or a website that you're building for your friends and family or another business, we want to make sure that when it comes to identity and authentication, we provide you with the right tools to help you get off the ground very quickly, no matter the language or the platform. And it does support many, many platforms and many languages, whether you're creating a mobile app, a desktop app, whether you're running on the cloud, our cloud or somebody else's cloud, doesn't really matter. We will support you. And finally, what other capabilities do you get from the platform? Well, quite a few. Yes. First and foremost, you get all the advanced features that we implement into our identity access management, whether that's two-factor authentication, FIDO keys, or what have you. And also we give you access to a very rich ecosystem through Azure or the Microsoft Graph, SharePoint, Online, and OneDrive, and everything else that you can think that can connect your users and create rich solutions for your customers. So as you start working with the platform, some of the things that we want to help you understand is what can you get, what do you get out of the box, right? It is designed for developers and want to simplify authentication for you. So some of the things they get is reducing sign-in friction. So whether your customers are coming from an enterprise environment or whether they're external to the solution, we want to give them the ability to quickly sign into the application and move on securely as well. So if you're an enterprise solution, you might want to benefit from single sign-on. If you are using your application to sign in external users, like customers, and then we will also want for them to be able to use the existing accounts maybe to bring them in. Accessing organizational data and enriching your applications through your own APIs or through the Microsoft Graph APIs is very important. So as you create your applications, think about how quickly you can integrate those APIs into that. And the identity platform that we provide you allows you to do that. Complying with IT is very important. So in the past, you would have your own username and password database somewhere within your solution. But as your applications start scaling out and you have more and more applications, those disparate databases become very hard for your IT team to support. So by bringing everything into a delegate authentication system like Azure Active Directory or B2C, it allows your enterprise IT team to very, very quickly manage and ensure that you're compliant, there's security, any risky behavior can quickly be identified So think about that as you create your applications and deciding to add authentication. And finally, we want to safeguard access. So you are responsible for writing your application and managing your users' data. And what we want to enable you to do is to quickly provide access to your solution, to your users, and only to authorized users with the appropriate permissions and safeguards around it. And if there is any risky behavior, to help you quickly identify that and fix it. Whether it's access to MS Cloud, whether it's access to SharePoint and on OneDrive, you should only be providing access to your authorized users and that their information remains secure within your application. So when it comes to developing around a platform, everything revolves around the idea of an app registration. An app registration in our platform is something that tells the solution that tells our identity platform that you're going to be interacting with our users or your users through an application. So the base of everything is an app registration within the Azure portal. You can either do it through the UI, i.e. the Azure portal on the web, or you can automate that and do it programmatically via PowerShell or the Microsoft Graph API. So as a developer, you can choose how you register your application. And next, you want to think about the authentication, right? So implementing the authentication, and that can happen in a few ways. One is we provide you with the MSAL library, the Microsoft Authentication Library, out of the box. So if you're developing in Node, Java, .NET, doesn't really matter, we'll provide you with the right library. And that is for client services. So whether you're building a mobile app, a desktop app, an automation task, then the library will work for you. But you can also bring your own library. If you already have an OpenID Connect library, then you don't have to use our libraries. You can use your existing solution. And that means that as long as you have the OpenID Connect certified endpoints configured in your solution that point to Azure Active Directory or B2C, you're good to go. And then you want access to some additional data, whether that's your Azure data, your database data, your own APIs, or even Microsoft's APIs like Graph, SharePoint, OneDrive, Files, Teams. Everything is available to you through the Identity Access Management System, our identity platform. And then we give you also options on how you authenticate your users. It can be through Azure AD, whether that's a work or a school account, so an enterprise account. Your users are already part of the Active Directory, so giving them access to other solutions should be seamless. Especially with single sign-on enabled, it becomes very easy for them to move from one application to another without having to type in their username and password every single time. But for other solutions, you might want to think account options like Microsoft account, i.e. your Outlook account, or external identities and B2C. So you might want to bring their social media accounts into the solution, so they don't have to create a brand new account. They just log in with their Twitter account into your solution, and we enable you to automate that or integrate with that. And the nice thing here is that we do have industry standards, right? That means that we support OAuth 2, we support OpenID Connect, SAML 2.0 and SCIM. And the idea there is that we're not locking you into a proprietary solution. We give you open standards. You can build your own libraries, you can take our own libraries, and it makes the integration and implementation very, very quick and simple. So with that, as a developer, you get some nice things here, right? First and foremost, the Microsoft Authentication Library, which I mentioned before, often referred as MSAL, it's the new version. The old ADAL has been deprecated as of June 2022, so if your solutions already use that, now it's a good time to start thinking about a migration. But if you're new to the platform, if you're just starting now, MSAL is the way to go. And the whole point of the MSAL is to wrap all the functionality that you need in your application to implement authentication and authorization and token acquisition and token management into one nice library for you. So you don't have to think about that. And that means that you develop in your favorite language and you use OpenID Connect to connect to our solution. And then when you use the MSAL libraries, you are secure by default. And I like this one, love this one, because you don't have to think about how you'll be connecting to the endpoints. You don't have to worry about complying with security policies. Everything will be built and supported out of the box. And also you get some amazing innovations that come to the platform without you having to rewrite any code. So as we add things like multi-factor authentication, passwordless, so if you're on Windows and use Windows Hello, then that means that you don't have to re-authenticate users through the UI or through the keyboard. They use their biometrics to connect to your solution. Conditional access, which means that you can restrict access to your applications based on certain criteria. And finally, additional security features into your applications can be implemented within a few lines of code. So if you need to add graph, for example, and pull data, you don't have to write tons and tons and tons of code. It's easy to implement and add to your solution. And on top of that, you get a much richer experience because, as I mentioned before, with Graph and Azure, by going through our identity platform, that information becomes very readily available to you, and you can make some really advanced solutions. So you can securely connect to the data that I have in Azure without you having to write an additional set of code or libraries or what have you. So let's take a look how easy it is to get started today. And the demo here is going to be about MSAL. So we're going to create a Node.js application that uses MSAL to authenticate users to the backend. Okay, so we're going to the Azure Active Directory to register a new application. This is what I need to get started with my solution. So app registrations, and then I click into the new registration, and we'll call it MS Stage Demo. We're gonna check for accounts in any organizational directory. So that will be a multi-tenant one, or we can decide just to use the local tenant one. So we'll go with this one. I'm going to click register here, so I'm not going to configure anything else. That's the basis of our solution. And if I go into quick start, it allows me to quickly select what I want to build. In this instance, we're going to build a web application, a single page application using JavaScript with the new auth code, the Pixie information. I'm going to say make these changes for me, right? So I don't know exactly what I'm going to use. So yes, we're going to go with the default localhost 3000, and then I'm going to download the code sample. So click this, check this out. So it downloads the zip file. I can go into the zip file over here, File Explorer. Let's open this one, and then if I go to downloads, let's extract all. I like this one, so we'll keep the default name. So in here now, I need to be able to run my application. So first, I'm going to open this in code, CMD, and then code dot, and I will open the project in the local file. A couple of very quick views here. So let me just maximize this one and make it bigger so we can all see this. First and foremost, server.js. We have all what we need here in the app. So we have a graph.js that calls into graph. We have the endpoint in the auth config. We're using the local information. The client ID was copied directly from the solution. And then everything else is out of the box. So all I have to do now is kick it off. So if I go into the terminal, new terminal, and then here I'm going to type npm install. We want to download all the dependencies, the packages like msal and graph that will allow us to communicate, as well as everything else that the application is using. And that seems to be all nice and good. So next we're going to do npm start to run our local service. Check this out, it's listening to port 3000, which is the same as the one that we configured in our solution. So now I can open my browser, open a new window and type localhost 3000 and navigate to our application. Oh wow, beautiful, sign in. Let's click this on, see what happens. I have already an account here, so I'm picking this one. It might ask me for two-factor authentication. Let's see how this one goes. And it asks what permission do you want to use. Actually, I'm going to access some information like my profile and offline access, which is the default. So here you can see my application is logged in. I already picked up my account, and I can check my profile, which we have already consented for. But now if I click on read emails, this is an elevate permission, so it asks me to consent again. So if I click that, it will ask me for permission now to read my email. So you can see that we have progressive access to my application. That's configured out of the box, so they don't have to do anything. And now we can read our emails. That's beautiful, end-to-end demo. Right, let's go back to our slides. Now I want to switch gears a little bit. I've already mentioned a little bit about Graph, and you saw me in the last demo using Graph for the solution. Graph is a gateway to your data. It allows you to enrich your solutions, and once you've signed in your users, then you can access their information. Very important, this is for organizational data. So if you are authenticating users with Azure Active Directory, business to consumer, then you don't really have access to Graph. So with organizational sign-ins, either school or business, you get access to the Microsoft Graph API. It's a very rich API that gives you RESTful access to the portal, timeline. You can search for solutions, you can integrate conversations, you can bring documents into your application as well. And you get deep insights as well into what your users are doing, usage patterns, trending documents, find people that interact with you all the time. And you also get real-time updates. So you can respond to changes in MS Graph in real time. We have ways to trigger that. And you'll notice that it supports a very large number of platforms. So whether you're building web apps or bots or device and native, even holographic apps with HoloLens, Daemon, and what have you, Graph is available to all these solutions, and it brings a large number of data connectors and endpoints. So you have your local data through connectors, and you also have access to the Azure platform via the Microsoft Graph Data Connect. And I love Graph because it allows you to do so many exciting things. So next I want to switch gear a little bit, and rather than implementing a solution, which we already saw a quick implementation with Graph, I want to show you how you can start working with Graph today. First and foremost, if you have never worked with Graph before, then we can actually jump into the Graph Explorer, and that will be aka.ms.ge. That's a Graph Explorer. And here we give you access to all our APIs. We have the GA stuff, the V1 stuff, and also the beta access to some more exciting things. You notice that it picked up my account, so it knows which account I'm using. You can also be unauthenticated. We'll still have some data for you to play with. And here you can actually see what you can build with the MS Graph. So first, we'll start with a simple one, which is the default, i.e. me, that pulls all the information from Active Directory to show some stuff. But you'll notice I can do a get photo not found. I can do my profile. We can do my email. You notice that with one call, we can get all information to the email. And check out, we have adaptive cards, which give you a nice rich experience to embed graph data into your code. I can check my manager, which I don't think I have one here. And that's their information here. And it's great because you can do so many things. For example, you can get user status or messages from Graph, and this is not the full information here. There's a very rich API. I like the people one that shows you people I work with or people I interact with all the time. So there's no adaptive card, but here you can see there are some people I collaborate with all the time, so it's very nice to get that. The next one is the management.dev. Yep. md.dev. This one is a toolkit. We have the Microsoft Graph Toolkit, which allows front-end solutions, single-page apps or JavaScript applications to very, very quickly build very rich experiences by using the Microsoft Graph Toolkit. And this is the playground, which allows you to play with the existing toolkit. Now, you notice we have an agenda, which shows us what the data should look like if we pull it back. And it's a one-liner. I just use one line of code to implement that, which is amazing. Now, let's say you want to start with a login, then all you have to insert is here a login. If the user is not authenticated, they get a prompt to authenticate or sign out or sign in. This one obviously is not implemented, but that's the whole point. You can also see what the JS and JavaScript should look like. And then further down here, you notice that there's a way for us to change the look and feel of certain things if we don't want, or if we don't like the default experience. So Graph becomes very easy to integrate with. And in fact, I've blogged about that in the past if you ever want to have a look on how to build these things. Now, before we move on, I really want to have a look into the documentation, because the Microsoft Graph Toolkit Playground or the Graph Explorer, they've done a really good job into providing you with access to all the available APIs that are out there. So if we go into docs.microsoft.com and Graph, then you do get access to all the different APIs. You can see what's new. You get a nice overview, services and features. So here we can jump into the functionality, and in the Learn is where you get access to all the different APIs, whether it's for a user or a group or an application, mail. You can see we have a huge list of available APIs, and we also have a huge list of SDKs. So we have the appropriate SDKs for the language that you want to use, whether it's .NET or C# or JavaScript or PHP or Ruby. You get another SDK to work with. So on top of MSAL, you get the Graph SDK to enable you to quickly get the data and transform them into your application in the way that you like. And it's easy to work with because you don't have to recreate the models from scratch. They come out of the box for you. So I would highly recommend, as you look into starting to integrate with Graph into your solutions, once you get your user and access tokens, then the next step is to most likely download the SDK and start working with. So have a look into the documentation. It's very important. It's a great source of information. And then once you identify an API you want to work with, you can come here and start working with that API. So you can grab, say, applications and look at the overview. You can maybe check at the configuring proxies or MSAL or provision. And once you get the API, so let's say create a gallery app, you can go to the Graph Explorer from here if you want to, or you can look into that. So if I, let's say, grab that one, that might not be available in the Graph Explorer. And because we don't expose everything here, you might not see something, you might assume that it's not available. So if I run the query now, lo and behold, you get all the information you need here, right? So these are all the sample applications that are available in my Azure AD. So make sure that you check the documentation before you move on. There you have it. Very important. Good starting point. Let's move on to the rest of the slides and the demo, right? So a few things as developers. Yeah, I understand we want to move fast and want to move quickly, but and as you saw, there are a lot of powerful things that we can build. However, as a company or as an enterprise, you want to make sure that the identity platform can be extended and implemented in such a way that not only protects your users, but protects you as a company as well. So things like conditional access enable you to be very explicit on how your users access the data or your customers access the data. And we recently announced conditional access as a preview for B2C as well, which means that not only do your internal users get to benefit from conditional access and a zero trust principle, you also allow this functionality for your external users. You might not want people to access your application from Europe, or if you have enabled risky access controls, which are also available in B2C and Azure AD. It means that if your users are known to operate inside the US, and suddenly you see a sign-in from Africa or Australia, then that actually creates a bit of an alert for you, and you should go and look into that. That's risky behavior, and we give you the right tools to protect and govern access to your enterprise solutions or your customer data. And you also want to provide users with easy access to a very rich ecosystem, billions of accounts, and a scalable solution. Things like a single sign-on to all their applications. I don't want as a user to have to sign in to my Outlook, and then you have to go and sign in to my Office account, and then have to sign in into Slack, and then I have to sign in to Box, and OneNote, or what have you. I want it to be seamless, and by using Azure AD and bringing all this under one umbrella to manage everything means that your users can also benefit and be more productive with our tools. And as we talk about security, I also want to touch on certain other things that you get for free as a developer when you work with our platform. Things such as multi-factor authentication or passwordless. I talked about Windows Hello before, where I just have to present my face and then my camera will do the biometric sign-in. We also have FIDO keys, and then we also want to have a seamless user experience as I move from one application to another without having to re-authenticate something. And finally, conditional access, right? I'm allowing people externally to come and access my solution, or internally, I want to provide them with certain criteria on how and where and when they can access my solutions as a company. And one thing I really love to talk about is how our platform integrates with everything. Unlike other platforms, unlike other tools out there, we provide you with an end-to-end experience. We can provide you with a secure development space where you create an application and it's secure end-to-end. And whether you're using Visual Studio or Visual Studio Code or Visual Studio for Mac or GitHub or our Azure libraries to access things like Microsoft 365 and Azure services. And then on the other hand, for professional developers, we have the professional developer tools that integrate tightly with the identity platform. And then on the other hand, if you have citizen developers, people in your business that can quickly go and use the Power Platform to build solutions, then they also integrate securely with and manage securely with the Microsoft Identity Platform, i.e. Azure AD. And that is a fantastic experience. Whether I'm developing locally or running on the cloud, I know that the exact same code that I've developed here is going to securely run on my local machine and in the cloud without me having to change anything. And I don't have to worry about usernames and passwords because things like managed identities make it super efficient and easy to work with. Okay. We talked about the interoperability and the end-to-end connectivity and functionality that we provide in the platform. So now I want to talk a bit about the feature that we called Easy Auth or Easy Authentication in Azure. And this is a very common scenario and the functionality that will probably make a lot of sense for people or for companies that have code out there that they've developed some time ago, and it doesn't provide you with an authentication and authorization experience. For that reason, we developed a feature inside our PaaS solution on Azure that enables you to add authentication and authorization to your applications on a turnkey mode. So technically, you don't really have to change anything in your code. What we do give you is the functionality that sits in front of your application as a proxy. So you take a solution that you developed 10 years ago, which has been happily running on premises for a while, and now you're moving to the cloud. Suddenly you don't have your network, you don't have the AD tenant that had in the past to protect your applications because you're not running on premises anymore. Now you need to add authentication. That application has been out there for a while. You might not even have access to the source code. It won't be the first time that this has happened to me or you, hopefully just me. And you want to add authentication. How would you go about achieving this one? Well, in the next demo, I'm going to show you how you can use Easy Auth in our PaaS platform to add authentication to an application and you don't have to worry about rewriting the code. And although I'm using .NET Core, which is fairly modern, this is just an example of any other application, whether it's .NET, PHP, Ruby, Python, it will add the authentication for your solution without you using any code. So let's go and run the demo. So here I have a vanilla .NET Core app. It doesn't have any authentication, as you can see here. I haven't implemented anything. It comes out of the box like this. So I have a claims page that pulls some user information from their token. So if the user is authenticated, I can go into this page and grab all the claims from their token. There's also a login page that checks whether the user is authenticated and then provides a sign out page, but I don't have any code that implements this functionality. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to publish this solution to the cloud, to Azure, into an existing Azure App Service on Windows. I'm going to select an existing subscription. I'm going to select an existing resource group, in this case the CM Easy Auth demo, until name, and I'm going to press finish. This is going to take the code from my local machine onto the cloud without me having to do any extra steps. Now, in the real world, you will be using a proper DevOps solution, whether that's GitHub Actions or Azure DevOps or any other solution you'd like to use. And there we are. Now we have the site up. It's launched. Let me sign out from here. I don't know why it's signed in. Ooh, refresh. There you have it. Now we're on the site. It's launched. Okay, we have it here. That's the site launched now. There's no authentication as we talked before. I'm on my home page. There's nothing here. If I go to the claims page, you notice it says not authenticated. That's because we have no way to authorize or authenticate the user right now, and that's the reason why we're not seeing anything. If we switch back to the portal, we have the authentication and authorization tab. Here's where we can come and define certain things like whether we want to have anonymous access or whether we want to enforce a login with one of the providers. The default one is to have Azure Active Directory, and I have a pre-configured one. So I've already created an app registration, and I use the Express settings to come and do that for me. And so when you press OK, that configures everything for you. And you also have options to log in people with Microsoft accounts, Facebook, Google, and Twitter. But in this case, we're using Active Directory. So if I click on this one and say yes or on here, and I press save, this will enable or enforce authentication to my website before I access it. So that happens as the request gets intercepted, and suddenly I'm presented with an authentication. If we go back to the overview and click on Browse, you'll notice that I'm directed to a sign-in page. I will select an existing account I already have, use my password, a very long and secure password. I'm prompted for two-factor authentication. I will go onto my phone and approve. See how I have strong authentication without even doing anything in my code, right? This is some legacy code that I've deployed there. Once they sign in, that's absolutely right. And this should take me back now to my application once the authentication process is completed. You know, so I have a sign out, which only gets enabled when we are signed in. And if I jump to the claims page, you notice how I have all the information around my user object. Again, I did not have to configure anything, and now I can sign out. We're prompted to sign out from a specific account, and I can close the browsers, and I'm done. Okay, that was a great demo, right? I was able to add authentication to my application without having to go and deploy any code. I was able to use EasyAuth with Azure App Service, add authentication, and then be able to move on without having to do any code changes, which is something very important for a lot of companies out there. Now, I would be remiss if I did not touch another subject that is dear to my heart. That is DevOps. Lots of developers out there, lots of IT pros have to do DevOps in order to be able to deploy their code from one environment to another. Usually you go from a developer environment to source code, and from there you have to deploy to a test environment or a QA environment or even production. And being able to do that securely is very, very important. And unfortunately, I've been out there for quite some time, and I have worked with many customers that it's actually hard to get it right. So we want to give you the tools and the ability to build pipelines, deployment pipelines that are secure by default. If you have worked with Azure, then you're probably aware of ARM templates, Azure Resource Management templates, which are in effect JSON files that describe your infrastructure. And now we're moving into infrastructure as code. So beyond code, you also have infrastructure as code, which allows you to define your infrastructure, your VMs, your web apps, your serverless solutions in a file or in code, and then be able to use that code to deploy the infrastructure. That's what you want to do. You don't want to manually go and deploy things every time you have to run something in an environment. And ARM is fantastic because, JSON, maybe it's not fantastic. People have a love-hate relationship with JSON. I would say it's okay to define things, but some people prefer other tools. And there is a plethora of developer tools and DevOps tools, including Terraform, ARM, YAML, TeamCity, Octopus Deploy, and so many other tools. But in this instance, we're focusing on ARM because it's a native tool for Azure. And when it comes to ARM, you have two files. You have the main file that defines your infrastructure, and I will give you an example here. We'll jump into my repo. And in my repo, I have an Azure deploy JSON file. And if we open and look into the file, so there are some parameters. Let me make this bigger so everybody can see this. There are some parameters. There is information about how the infrastructure looks. So we pass into the resources here. And so we have a SQL server, for example. We have databases in there, nothing else. It's a simple SQL server and the database. But you'll notice that we need to pass an administrator login and administrator login password. In the olden days, if you had to work with Azure Resource templates, you would either hard code these values in a parameters file. So let's jump in the parameters file. You notice here we pass the location, we pass the server name, but now things are getting a little bit tricky because you have to define the administrator login, which is fine, it's not too sensitive, but the password is here, which is something that is extremely insecure. First of all, because we are actually checking clear text passwords inside our source code. So if our source code ever becomes compromised, people will have access to our production environment and passwords and sensitive information. And secondly, because developers don't really have access to this kind of information, especially in a production environment. A lot can happen. They can do a lot of damage. Same for IT pros, right? Something we talked in the past was the break glass approach, where only a few people have access to the actual live credentials. And then if somebody else needs to jump in, then there's a safe, virtual safe or an actual safe. They can go and break the glass and grab this information. But for now, we will focus on the fact that our infrastructure's code here includes clear passwords, clear text passwords. Very unsafe. Now I could run this ARM deployment through my Azure DevOps solution here or through my Azure pipelines. It would be absolutely fine. But you might ask, is there a better way? Is there a way for us to be able to still run this as infrastructure as code without compromising security? And I will say yes. If you are working with Azure, if you are working with our templates and possibly other tools, then you can use Azure Key Vault. Azure Key Vault is a resource on Azure that, as the name probably implies, allows you to store sensitive information securely in a vault, a key vault. That can be certificates, that can be secrets, that can be passwords, API keys, everything. And when it comes to deploying ARM templates, then we also have the ability to go and pull that information at runtime and deploy our resources securely without having to compromise usernames and passwords. And somebody from the IT team can go and change and rotate those passwords without affecting how you run your infrastructure on a day-by-day basis. So if you see here, what we do is instead of having the secret name and the actual password value or the administrator login information hard-coded, we're actually referring to a key vault that lives somewhere in our infrastructure. And then we're able to reference the key vault here and ask for a specific secret name. So in my key vault, I have a secret name called SQL Administrator Login. I can go and pull that information across and run it anytime I want. Well, people might say here, you know, Chris, there are still some hard-coded values that I don't feel safe about. I get it. So in this instance, the subscription name is hard-coded, which doesn't make it too portable, right? I might want to point to multiple subscriptions and deploy to multiple places. That's fantastic. In that case, we can use variables here and tokenize this. So depending on when we're running it or where we're running it, we can pass a different subscription in this space. We can also change the resource group to point to a different resource group. And again, rather than hard coding it, we can make it available as a variable at runtime. And same for the actual key vault name, which makes our code even more portable. So I can have a different subscription for my QA environment, a different subscription for my production environment. And it all ties everything nicely together, because below everything else is a service principal, an identity inside our Azure AD that tells the deployment job what permissions to run under or what account to run under. And then that same service principal account has the ability to go inside our key vault and only pull the information that we need. It doesn't have the permission to write, it doesn't have the permission to create, just as read permissions into our key vault, to that specific key vault, in order to be able to pull that. And we can have multiple service principals for multiple environments. So you can actually start seeing that this segregation allows us to create security layers in our deployment pipeline without compromising security. And if we were to run this one, we'll go into our pipelines, and if I go into my releases, if I click on this one, then I can run the pipeline, and this will go and run based on the permissions, the service principal I define, and deploy our code to production. Simple as that. Microsoft Identity underpins everything we do, from developing code locally to running the code in production to deploying the code in production. So I hope that you enjoyed this demo as well. So we covered developers, we covered IT pros, we covered front-end developers, we covered DevOps people as well. So I hopefully these demos have brought a nice visibility on the end-to-end functionality and a nice integration we have across our stack. Still with me? Cool. Right. Thank you for making it through to the end of the session. I hope you enjoyed the demos. I hope you learned something new about the Microsoft Identity Platform today. If you're looking for next steps, I would urge you to use the ak.ms Identity Platform URL to go and find and read more about the Identity Platform. There you can get the information about the necessary libraries that you need to use with your application. You can find quick starts and download samples on how to build solutions around the Identity Platform, protect your APIs, or consume Azure. And finally, we give you a rich number of resources such as Graph Explorer or the toolkit that you can test and see how you can pull information to enrich your applications. And if you want to get in touch with me, I definitely I'm available to you through various channels. First and foremost, I am a lot on Twitter, so you can find me there. We also stream twice a week, every Tuesday and Thursday at 7 a.m. on the 45 show on Twitch. We also have a number of blog posts that tend to summarize what we do on a day-by-day basis. And finally, if you have a complex issue or you want some support from us, feel free to reach out via email, which is at the bottom of the slide. We look forward to hearing from you, and I hope you enjoy the session today and the rest of the conference. Thank you so much.